So I've been asked to address by some in the groups and some out of the groups, and people asking can and will they get funding if not participating in the groups. Well, yes, you can, but that kind of negates what I was trying to achieve with the groups of people working together and not all separate. But no, it will not negate that. We have other issues of people complaining of having X amount of members and only a quarter or less turning up for the calls. And this is kind of a common theme. And it's also why I said you didn't have to make a fuss over leaders, as many would not participate anyway after the initial interest wanes. That's the way it works. Now, some groups have taken the steps to remove members out of groups for not participating in the calls or groups, which is their choice. But one hopes it doesn't lead to a whole raft of emails to me complaining about it. Please email or message your group leader, please, not me. Right, let's get into some news items. I need to do a sound check. Is the sound okay? Because this is a new platform this week, and this will be permanent now, seeing as Spreaker decided to take away the web console. So if someone can let me know that the sound level is okay, I would appreciate it. Right, news. Nearly 2 million people have taken part in a mass protest in Hong Kong against a controversial extradition bill, and if confirmed it will be the largest protest in Hong Kong's history. People everywhere now are protesting. It's good to see. But the police said the turnout was 338,000. They always reduce it. Even if it's 338,000, it's a lot of people who are protesting against wrong rules against the people. We need more like that. Now, the masses turned out despite the suspension of the bill, which would allow extradition from Hong Kong to the mainland China on Saturday. Now, the Hong Kong leader, Carrie Lam, on Sunday apologised for proposing the bill. And many protesters who fear increased Chinese influence over Hong Kong, which, remember, was a British colony until not so long ago, and they are calling for her to resign over the unrest. And they are also demanding that the bill be scrapped altogether, not just suspended. This is eerily reminiscent of what happened in South Korea, is it not? Late last year or early this year. Time kind of flies, where they're proposing all kinds of stuff, and thankfully the people are responding to it now. That's the key to it. Nip it in the bud. Meanwhile, supporters of Joshua Wong, the student leader who became the face of Hong Kong's umbrella movement democracy protests 5 years ago, say he will be released from prison later this week. Good stuff. Sign of the times. Again, they always start off with something small in one place and test it. I'll have more on this later. But a new RV, not the monetary RV, hashtag Operation Stupidity. A new RV ban has officially gone into effect recently in Colorado Springs, Colorado. While most of these parked RVs have cleared, some folks have driven off as far out as Woodland Park and left, and those left behind are trying to get rid of their RVs altogether. One of the RVs parked in the downtown area along Sierra Madre Street donned the bright green ticket RV owners could expect if they stayed parked along public streets. It was just another day, said Michelle Mead, one of those few RV residents left, and she says she's lived in Colorado Springs for 15 years. But a year ago she lost her home and everything was just starting to cost too much. I couldn't afford it. Bills got outrageous. Ever since then, she lived inside of her RV. Now that she's run out of time to drive away, she's having to give up on that also. I'm getting ready to scrap out, so I have a little bit of money, trying to put it on something, a van or something, she said, and it's more trouble than it's worth trying to fix it up, and she wants to venture out and find other opportunities, just as many others have done in a position who have been forced out. She went on to say just trying to get out where we're looking for work is a key issue. Now, the way the ordinance works is first-time offenders will be fined $25, the second ticket would be $100, and the third would be $125, and after 4 tickets, offenders would then be sent to court. More on that later. In the UK now, free TV licences, which was for the elderly, now they've decided that they're going to scrap that for up to 3.7 million pensioners. For those in the UK, for the traditional non-cable channels, which is the BBC 1 and 2. It's about BBC 10 now since I've left. And it used to be ITV and Channel 4. And there's various other channels now. That if you were a pensioner, you had to pay for the BBC. It's the BBC that imposes the licence. I have no idea what it costs now, probably £100 and odd, which is near $200 for the year. But pensioners used to get it for free. Now, under new rules, only low-income households where one person receives the pension credit benefit will still be eligible for a free licence. Now, in 2015, the government announced the BBC would take over the cost of providing free licences to over 75s by 2020 as part of a fee settlement, but that would have cost $745 million, a fifth of the so-called BBC's budget. And a new scheme will cost the BBC around $250 million by 2021-22, depending on the take-up. Now, funding free TV licences for all over 75s would have resulted in unprecedented closures, according to the British Buggering Children organisation. Israeli PM Mr. Nutty Asshole has unveiled a new settlement in the occupied Golan Heights, which doesn't belong to them. In fact, nothing belongs to them. Which is curiously and disappointingly, time will tell, named after the US President Donald Trump. After a naming ceremony last Sunday, Mr. Netanyahu said Trump Heights honoured Mr. Trump for his decision to recognise Israeli sovereignty over the territory, which actually belongs to Syria. Oops. Building work has yet to begin, but a sign bearing Mr. Trump's name and US and Israeli flags was unveiled during the ceremony. Now, critics have called the move a publicity stunt with no legal authority. Unfortunately, the UN is unable to enforce that authority, despite Israel breaking more UN sanctions than the rest of the countries around the world put together. So Israel seized the Golan Heights from Syria in 1967, and in March the US became the first country to recognise Israeli sovereignty over the area since Israel effectively annexed it in 1981. This is a historic day, said Mr. Netanyahu, hailing President Trump as a friend of Israel. The US ambassador David Freeman, born in New York, born to Jewish parents, who attended the ceremony, called the settlement well-deserved but much appreciated. Further news from Israel. The wife of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has admitted to misuse of state funds and will have to pay $15,000 in return. Sarah Netanyahu was accused of spending $99,300. That's a big difference, that, isn't it? Where's the other $78,000 gone? On outside catering, while falsely declaring there was no cooks available at the Prime Minister's residence. And she was charged with fraud and a breach of trust. Her lawyer said the case had nothing to do with her and said that it was an attempt to bring down her husband. But under a plea deal, Mrs. Netanyahu will repay the state $12,490 and pay a fine of $2,777, and she will have a criminal record, though the charges she faced were reduced. Prosecutor Erez Padan said that the prosecution had made significant concessions that led to a balanced and right plea deal. He said the compromise had saved the court from calling on 80 witnesses. Egypt's former president Mohamed Morsi has died, quote unquote, suddenly following a court appearance in Cairo, according to Egyptian state television anyway. He was 67. The former president and Muslim Brotherhood leader collapsed after a trial session in an espionage lawsuit on Monday for alleged contact with Hamas. He had reportedly been given permission from the presiding judge to address the court before he fainted. Now, Morsi came to power after Hosni Mubarak was deposed in mass Arab Spring protests back in 2011. However, he only ruled for a year after being elected to the post before he was toppled by the military following mass protests back in 2013. Special counsel Robert Mueller said last month that charging President Trump with a crime was not an option we could consider because of the Justice Department policy barring the prosecution of sitting presidents. Yeah, right. And the Democrats are now talking about finding a way to change that law. And Senator Warren, Mrs. I am 1024th Pocahontas, says Congress should make it clear that presidents can be indicted for criminal activity, including obstruction of justice. Okay, fine. Let's bring in George Bush Jr., Bill Clinton and Obama then. See how that works. US President Donald Trump has announced his choice for Defense Secretary has withdrawn, shaking up the Pentagon at a time of rising Middle East tensions. He tweeted that Patrick Shanahan has pulled out of consideration so that he can devote more time to his family. Mr. Shanahan, who will be replaced by Army Secretary Mark Esper, has not yet been nominated for the cabinet post, and it comes as Mr. Shanahan publicly addressed allegations of domestic violence. Mr. Trump told reporters Mr. Shanahan submitted his withdrawal on Tuesday morning. I didn't ask him to withdraw, but he walked in this morning and said it was going to be a rough time for him. Trump said that it was the first he'd heard of the unfortunate allegations on Monday, and earlier on Tuesday, USA Today reported the FBI was investigating a 2010 incident, really, in which Mr. Shanahan and his ex-wife accused each other of assault. We'll have more on that later. These next, in fact, most of the rest of the news, there's about 6 or 7 pieces. Curiously, perhaps not, have all been covered in our show at some time or other. It seems now that the mainstream media, who is failing rapidly, is deciding to give people some of our news, not theirs, to try and pull people back in. time will tell. But a couple of news comments that supports what this show has said recently, and another example of things said creeping into the mainstream media. First off, as expected, the funds by high-end corporate companies that they are going to put large funds to pay for the damage of the Notre Dame Church. Remember all them Estee Lauder, etc. Predictably, those funds never arrived. Oh my. All of it is a sick and slick marketing ploy as advertisement for their overpriced brands. That's all it is. Add in the herd mentality and the guilt of, oh my God, the poor church. And the ones who always end up paying for it is the people. You know, imagine if they did that and put it into the People's Club fund I proposed a few years back, just $1, £1 or €1, depending on your own currency, a month, and the money that could go to real projects and real people. CNN, Clinton News Network, ran a piece about the reducing white population in America. Oh my. But it's not just reducing in America, is it? It's globally. 30% plus, down to 12 in less than 100 years. Just like the Dark Forces wanted. For those of you who haven't listened to the details of that, should listen to the From Russia with Love series. It covers the whole lot. This week, Facebook announced the launch of Libra, cryptocurrency. Oh my. All those people who said crypto was bucking the system. I suspect we will hear more on this subject soon. Keith Raniere, of course, our show ran the NXIVM 7 months before the media got a hold of it, and large parts of the alt media as well. Of NXIVM, a self-help guru accused of leading a sex cult that enslaved women, has now been found guilty of all charges against him. Raniere, who was 58, was convicted by a jury after a 6-week trial in Brooklyn, New York. And he oversaw a slave and master system in his group called NXIVM, and he was convicted of all counts against him, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and also child pornography. Mr. Raniere, who pleaded not guilty to all charges, could face life in prison. One hopes we don't get a Jerry Epstein type prison sentence. But I wouldn't rule that out, given it's in New York, in case Mr. Raniere talks. Now, during the trial, the court heard how female recruits in the group were branded with his initials and coerced into having sex with Raniere, and recruits were also told it was an all-female group and were asked to hand over compromising materials, i.e. They had to strip off and take pictures of them in the nude, and were later used to blackmail them, according to prosecutors. Anyway, he's been found guilty on all charges. Another story that we covered in From Russia with Love, and also in a couple of shows, there's been a somewhat fiery debate has erupted at the first congressional hearing in a decade to explore whether the descendants of US slaves should be compensated. Some witnesses said reparations would damage the relationship between white and black Americans, while others said it was imperative to achieve justice. And several Democratic White House hopefuls have taken up the idea of reparations. Well, they would, wouldn't they? But Republican leader Mitch McConnell has made it clear no reparations bill will pass while he controls the Senate. and the House of Representatives Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights and Civil Liberties said at Wednesday's hearing would examine the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, its continuing impact on the community and the path to restorative justice. Lawmakers considered a bill proposed by Texas Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee to set up a commission to study the questions of reparation for slavery. Hundreds of people lined up outside the hearing venue and filled the overflowed room to watch what was going on. My opinion? No. Because when you tell the real story, which has been covered extensively by Dane, I can't remember his second name now, who is black. The slave trade between transatlantic is largely fake. It's their story. We covered it extensively in From Russia with Love. I think it was 3. The Africans were rounding up their own people. So if there's reparations to be paid, you have to go back to where it all started, which means you have to go to the black Africans to pay. Not make whites pay or Americans pay. Why should present day Americans or any other country pay for something that happened over 100 years ago or near 300 years ago? Where's the reparations for the Irish? Why is no one mentioning that? Again, it's this divide and conquer. That's what it's all about. Because it didn't work last year with and the year before with Black Lives Matter, they always carry on with another programme. But I've never heard the Irish say, where's our reparations? Or the people thrown out of Britain or Eastern Europe. Oh no, the only problem with them is they're all white. These people are vultures, and we, the current people, should not pay for what any of our ancestors did. Yes, there was white people involved, but who were running the slave ships? The Jewish people. So perhaps you can go to Israel and Africa if you want reparations, not America. People have to get their act together. This is dollar signs flashing above their eyes. They care not for their ancestors. Let's be honest. Let's be real, brutal honest. It's all about the money again. And the guilt programme to pass it off onto the whites. When as that lad Dane, who I'll repeat again, is black, told you all that slavery was done by their own people. Long before the Europeans got there. Long before. Needs to be nipped in the bud. US military surveillance drone has been shot down by Iranian forces while flying over the Straits of Hormuz. Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards said the aircraft had violated Iranian airspace and that the incident sent a clear message to America. But the US military insisted the drone had been over international waters at the time and condemned what it called an unprovoked attack. If it was it'd be unprovoked if you weren't in their waters. Donald Trump tweeted, Iran made a very big mistake and the incident comes at a time of escalating tension between the two countries. And on Monday, the US Defense Department said it was deploying an extra 1,000 troops to the region in response to hostile behaviour by Iranian forces. And it has already sent an aircraft strike group, carrier strike group, and B-52 bombers. This is the Neo-Hawks clowns. We'll have more on that later. Another piece that we covered extensively recently was about India and the demonic Bill Gates and his foundation of death by vaccines. This time the BBC has decided to cover it, only this time it's in Pakistan. They're just rolling it all out. And here's a small excerpt of it. The girl is no more than 5. She cowers in her room, crying incessantly. "I don't want to die," she sobs, and her parents have finally been persuaded that the vaccine is safe. She is brought out to watch her siblings stick out their tongues for drops, but she continues to wail. The fear in the house is palpable. Now, the polio workers, assassins, were earlier barred from the house by her relatives who were bearing rifles. The team called in help from Dr. Uzma Hayat Khan, who is a public health advisor, and Khan, who monitors the country's vaccination campaigns, is experienced in dealing with refusals. But she was nervous as she approached the house. She had been greeted by a group of men with no intentions of letting her inside, and the standoff only ended when another relative appeared, who was a doctor. The polio team then managed to vaccinate all the children except for the sobbing girl, and they decided to try again the next day. Now, many people in Pakistan, no doubt aware of what went on in India, are suspicious of the polio vaccine. And according to the report, despite the fact it saves lives, there is no evidence to support that whatsoever. But tensions were running higher than usual, and the day before their visit, a mass vaccination at a village school in the suburbs of Peshawar had ended in violence and arson. Now, the headmaster of the school in the Mashakal village had previously refused to allow the polio vaccine. This time he had to bow to government pressure, and the inoculations had gone ahead. But shortly afterwards he rang parents to tell them their children were fainting and also vomiting. Dozens of students from the school were taken to the hospital, where they were all found to have no symptoms and were discharged. Yeah, right. But it was too late to contain the panic, which had spread quickly via social media, and furious parents gathered outside a local government health facility, broke down its boundary wall with hammers, we like hammers, and sticks, kicked down the front gate and barged inside to burn it down. All of this was shown on live local TV, which sparked even greater alarm in Peshawar. In all, about 30,000 children from various schools in the city were taken to the hospital, according to the government. And in a press conference, the provincial health minister said the panic had been further fuelled by local mosques urging parents via loudspeaker to rush their vaccinated children to hospital. Yeah, as if. All the children, it is said, according to the minister, were found to be well. Yeah, right. So the polio vaccine, which we highlighted in India, now rolls into Pakistan, having already gone through Africa, where they were vaccinating children with guns pointed at the head by the military. This is what's going on, folks. Just because it's not happening here doesn't mean to say we have to ignore it elsewhere. I'm going to play a piece now. If people ever doubted about what is behind this, here's the man himself in his own words, Bill Gates.
Over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has four factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. Let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. Do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use. This encompasses everything: the food we eat, clothing, TV, heating. These are very good things. Getting rid of poverty means providing these services to almost everyone on the planet. And it's a great thing. So this is a wish. It's a very concrete wish that we invent this technology. If you gave me only one wish for the next 50 years, I can pick who's president, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love.
$10 billion over the next 10 years to make it the year of the vaccines. What does that mean exactly?
Well, over this decade, we believe unbelievable progress can be made, both inventing new vaccines and making sure they get out to all the children who need them. We could cut the number of children who die every year from about 9 million to half of that if we have success on it. And the benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows the benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows the society a chance to take care of itself once you've made that intervention. Reducing the population growth, it really allows the society a chance to take care of itself once you've made that intervention.
There's been a lot.
Once you've made that intervention, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love.
There you go. Bill Gates loves vaccines, population reduction, down to zero, as he said, with a load of satanic seals clapping and laughing in the background, as they knew full well what he was talking about. And this is kind of what we're dealing with here. We can all talk about the funds and the Manor World Holding Trust and many other things and ET disclosure. But while we've got psychopaths on the planet who just want to wipe everyone out bar them, the chosen ones, that has to be the primary focus. It has to be. And the only way to do it is to highlight it wherever you go and play pieces like that. It's right in your face.